Creedence Clearwater Revival. And what a group they were. They gave us a lot of good hits. Just want to share with our audience, Dave, just some quick background music of CCR and the history of CCR. And then we have, as you just heard, Bad Moon Rising, the intro of the show, one of their very biggest hits. And during the closing of the show, I'd like to share with our audience, Dave, their signature song, Proud Mary.
Sure.
But there's lots of area to cover, so let's get at it. The Creedence Clearwater Revival consisted of John Fogerty. John, of course, was the instrumental driving force of Creedence Clearwater Revival. He was a songwriter, lead vocalist. He's multi-experienced at many different instruments, electric guitar, so on and so forth. Also, his older brother, Tom Fogerty. There was Doug Clifford, of course, on the drums, and Stu Cook on bass. So there you have it. John, Tom Fogerty, Doug Clifford, Stu Cook. 4 guys comprising Creedence Clearwater Revival. Now, Dave, with the audience, this is kind of complicated. Their genres actually covered about 6 different areas of music, and they comprised of roots rock, swamp rock, blues rock, southern rock, country rock, and blue-eyed soul. But hey, let's back up a minute. Let's kind of condense that into 2 genres and cover all of those genres. By that I mean CCR were classic rock and rockabilly. Those 2 genres take care of everything. Once again, they were classic rock and rockabilly.
Interesting.
Their active years from 1959 to 1972. Wow. And a lot of people thought, well, CCR, 1968 to about 1970. But they got their start in 1959, and they formed a band. It was their first band called the Blue Velvets.
Ooh.
And this was kind of like a bit of southern rock and blues, this type of thing. But the Blue Velvets, then they were renamed the Gollywogs. And this was taken from a cartoon caricature on TV. Well, that didn't last very long because I know Tom Fogerty, he put up a real stink about that. The Gollywogs, what the heck's going on? So in 1967, what they did, they renamed their band, Creedence. That came from Tom's best buddy. His first name was Creedence.
Oh, that's cool.
Then they saw this beer commercial on TV, one of the huge American breweries, and they said they use nothing but clear water to brew the beer. So hence, here we have Creedence Clearwater. Okay, then, let's say Revival. Revival, that comes from Max Yasgur's Farm, Woodstock, 1969. Revival of love and peace. So there you have it. Hence, Creedence Clearwater Revival, or as a lot of people call them now, kind of slang, CCR.
Yeah. Interesting how they came to that name. I didn't know that. That's pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. And the other thing, Dave, I wanted to share with our audience, the band performed, as I mentioned earlier, in 1969 at Woodstock, of course, in upstate New York, Max Yasgur's farm, over 650 acres. So he had quite the acreage. But this I didn't know. Creedence Clearwater Revival, they were the first major act to sign to appear at Woodstock 69. I never knew. Like, there was Joe Cocker, there was Joni Mitchell,
everybody.
There was Janis Joplin. You go on and on and on.
Carlos Santana.
CCR were the first major act to sign for Woodstock. Now, how good is that?
That's pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Well, CCR's music, Dave, was certainly a staple of U.S. classic rock and radio airplay. And CCR, they sold over 28 million records in the U.S. alone.
Wow.
Now, here in Canada, they did a little over 20 million records. And
that's huge.
That's like superstardom right there. Now, the compilation album, The Chronicle, the 20 Greatest Hits of CCR, which was originally released in 1976, is still on the Billboard 200 album charts, and it's reached over 500 weeks. It's still on there. We're going way back to 1976. It's still on the Billboard 200 album chart. It reached over 500 weeks in December of 2020.
Holy smokes. I didn't know that either. That's pretty incredible. That's longevity right there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So the Blue Velvets, their first band, they were instrumental in starting what would become Creedence Clearwater Revival. The years for the Blue Velvets, 1959 to 1964. And here's a little tidbit of FYI. In 1963, April of 1963, Bobby Vinton had a humongous hit with Blue Velvet. But the Blue Velvets, I think in part, Blue Velvet, that was a song way back in the late 40s.
Yeah.
Bobby Vinton reintroduced it, and he made a platinum hit out of that. Well,
I wonder if they wore blue velvet suits. I wonder.
Dave, that's a darn good question.
Yeah, we'll have to look that one up.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Honestly, I really don't know. And same with Bobby Vinton when he sang Blue Velvet. That was October of 1963.
Yeah.
He was always a sharp dresser, but he may have worn Blue Velvet, singing Blue Velvet, the song too.
Who knows?
We're going to check into that one.
Well, that's a little quiz for next month.
Yeah, sounds good. So, John Fogerty, Doug Clifford, Stu Cook, and of course, John's older brother, Tom, they went to the Portola Junior High School, and that was in El Cerrito, California. And of course, they played a lot of instrumentals, the Blue Velvets, a lot of instrumentals, and a lot of the jukebox standards. And it was Casey Kasem, and we all know Casey Kasem, LA's foremost rock DJ for many, many years. He had heard them, and he picked them up, and he played a lot of their songs on KEWB in Oakland, California. So this is how they really got their first start into the radio airwaves. And boy, did the DJs really push it, not only in California, but hey, also up here in Canada. There was one radio station in Chicago, WLS, and they were a powerhouse in radio in the decade of the 60s. WLS Chicago. They had some great DJs on that radio station, and they played the hits of the day, and they did it very, very well. Very knowledgeable DJs.
Their sound, CCR sound, I like what you said, how you described all the different genres it came from, but to me, it always reminds me for some reason, a more intense Beach Boy sound, like the guitars.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Hey, very true, Dave.
And I knew they were. I thought they were California based. I wasn't sure. I'm glad you brought that up. But that sound is so distinctive, right? Like it's another. You always know a CCR song when it comes on. You just know by that flavor. But and I wonder too if, because you said in '59, I bet you Elvis had some influence there as well. You got to believe that sound too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And a lot of the old blues guys, you definitely hear blues in there.
Absolutely. So, Dave, in fact, yes, Elvis was one of their heroes.
Yeah.
Elvis Presley, his music, they loved it. Also, Chuck Berry.
Yes. Chuck Berry song.
The Motown sound. Can't forget Detroit City, the Motown sound. So they had a lot of different acts that they truly liked. And from this, they formulated, not copywriting, but they formulated their own songs based on the beat of that particular genre for that particular artist or band.
But it's amazing, isn't it? Like you yourself, as soon as you hear a CCR, you know what the sound is so distinctive. Like it's their
very
sound.
Unique, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very unique. Yeah. In 1964, CCR, they signed with Fantasy Records, and Fantasy Records, that was an independent jazz label in San Francisco. Now, the band was attracted to the label after they had heard the recording by Vince Giraldi, his song Cast Your Fate to the Wind, which had national success. But there was another version of that, Dave, I want to share with the audience. In 1965, Sounds Orchestral, they brought out Cast Your Fate to the Wind, and that did quadruple platinum. Actually, in all due respect to Vince Giraldi, he had a good version, but Sounds Orchestral had a better version. Mm-hmm. Just a thought. So for the band's first release, Fantasy co-owner Max Weiss, he was the fellow who renamed the CCR initially from the Blue Velvets. He renamed the group the Gollywogs. That did not last very long. Tom Fogarty, he just said, this is a joke. We're going to come up with a name ourselves. And hence in 1967, it became Clearwater Revival. Now in 1966, John Fogarty and Doug Clifford was their drummer. They were conscripted into the U.S. Armed Forces. And Fogarty, he joined the U.S. Army Reserve, while Doug Clifford joined the U.S. Coast Guard Reserve. Now, eventually, after the service, John took control of the group by singing lead vocals, and he blossomed into a multi-instrumentalist who played keyboards, he played harmonica, he played saxophone, just to mention a few. Like, this guy was a walking band, you know? And but the name change, I think that was appropriate in how they got the name change, Creedence Clearwater Revival. And that, as I mentioned, came about in the year of 1967. Now, by 1968, AM radio programmers, and yes, we were still in AM radio at that time, and around the clock, took note CCR's cover of the 1956 rockabilly song Susie Q. And they started playing this Susie Q religiously, and it was saturating the airwaves of all of the larger American radio stations and also here in Canada.
So let's stop right there for a second and ask you, what was it like when Susie Q came out? Do you remember hearing it for the first time?
Oh, I certainly do. And
I bet you do.
It was just like, wow. I said to my brother Rudy at the time, I said, Susie Q, this will do platinum sales in the States.
Yeah. And you were right.
And he kind of looked at me as though I was from Mars. Oh God. Anyway.
But you have that ear, so you knew it was gonna hit big.
Yeah. Interesting. So, and as I mentioned, it got a lot of airplay, especially in the San Francisco Bay Area, the radio stations, of course, Chicago's WLS. It was the band's second single, and it reached number 2 on the Billboard Top 100.
That was what, 67?
That'd be 1967. Yeah.
And you're competing with the Beatles, folks.
Yeah, so they certainly are.
Yeah, there's a lot of great bands.
Certainly
Stones. And, yeah. Great. Yeah. Excellent.
Their peak success, looking at their years from 1959 to 1972, I would have to say, Dave, that their peak success were the years of 1969 and 1970.
Yeah.
Those 2 years, they brought out numerous hits. They were the prime years for CCR. After their breakthrough, CCR began touring, and they started work on their second album, Bayou Country, and it was released in January of 1969 at an RCA studio in Los Angeles. And this is the first time they actually performed and did trial efforts in a full recognized RCA studio in Los Angeles. In fact, they had all the play toys at their fingertips. So, I mean, how good is that? Now, the single Proud Mary, Dave, it was backed with Born on the Bayou. And I really want to share this with our folks. A lot of their songs in the 45s, we still were in 45 RPMs at that moment in time. And a lot of their B-side songs became their major hits, whereas their A-side songs were not so. And I just want to share this very quickly, Dave, with the audience.
Well, Randy's getting that ready, folks. A lot of times they would release the A-side as the one that you thought would be the big hit, and the B-side was just a follow-up, just in case. And in CCR's case, as Randy's showing us right now, the A-side didn't do great, but the B-side took off, Randy?
Absolutely correct. And can you see that a little bit?
Just barely. Dave? Yeah, but it's there. Yep.
You can see at the top, you've got the Fantasy Record logo.
Yep.
You have Bad Moon Rising. This is the B-side.
B-side.
We flip it over, and we get Lodi. Now, Lodi was a good song, too, but it
didn't do the numbers.
Didn't do nearly as well as Bad Moon Rising.
Wow, and you were telling me before we started the show today that they had a number of those happen where the B-side went straight up the charts and the A-side didn't. So that's kind of unique to them, isn't it?
Very, very unique, Dave.
Yeah.
Especially for a rock band, because these record companies and all the big record companies like Fantasy, Decca Records, Columbia, during that time frame of the decade of the 60s, early 70s, these were huge record companies, and they had the control over the A-side or B-side, which songs they wanted to. They listen to the songs. Okay, well, guess what? CCR, 75% of the time, proved them incorrect. And I'm also holding in my hand here, Dave, from Fantasy Records.
Yeah.
It's the 45, and it is a compilation, which you get today in a compilation on hard drive or on CDs. This is a compilation of all their hits on 145. And
on 145.
Also, too, we have to remember that back in those days, in the decade of the 60s, these records were mono. Well, this record here is stereo.
Oh.
A stereo 45. Unheard of.
Yeah, you best lock that away.
Yeah,
best lock that away.
Yeah, this is going back into the vault.
Yeah.
Oh boy,
but that's pretty cool. Yeah, I didn't know that they did that. I didn't know they did a compilation on 45. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, they're very rare. There were a few groups that did that, not a lot, but CCR did it, and hey, that's terrific.
That's wonderful. I didn't. Yeah, I appreciate. That's something I had no clue about. But I mean, I had old 45s, not like yours. But that's pretty neat that they would do that. So we're up to what, 69? Are they going to Woodstock? Do they go to Woodstock?
Yes, they did go to Woodstock, and they were the first major rock group that was called upon to perform at Woodstock. And I didn't know. I knew they were there. I knew they performed, but I didn't realize they were the first rock group that was called upon to perform at Woodstock in August of 1969. Like that's
that either. That's cool. Yeah,
that is huge.
It's awesome.
Now, as we proceed, as I mentioned, their peak success was the years of 1969 and 1970. During April of 1969, Bad Moon Rising, backed with Lodi, back to back, this 45 we just saw, was released, and it peaked at number 2 in the United States. In the United Kingdom, it spent 5 weeks at number 1, and here in Canada, it spent 6 weeks at number 1. Wow. That's Bad Moon Rising. Lodi, that Bad Moon Rising was the B-side, and Lodi was the A-side, but Bad Moon Rising was quadruple the sales of Lodi. Here again, A-side, B-side.
I had read that Bad Moon Rising was maybe Fogerty's pointing to the eventual breakup of the band and just mismanagement, if you will. But that song had a lot of powerful lyrics in it that he was getting out. He was quite the lyricist too, with the way he worded things and put songs out like that. But that was one of the stories I had read on Bad Moon. I had read a book a number of years ago that sort of had indicated that. So interesting. It's interesting what songwriters will go through, right, to get that, maybe what's happening in their own lives to get that song out. It's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And in October of 1969, their first album on the Billboard Top 200 went gold. Now, one of the songs in that album was Green River. Yeah. And that's a real, still to this day at the dances that I do, Dave, Green River, Bad Moon Rising, Proud Mary, those are probably the top 3 songs from CCR amongst many others that I get requests for. Bad Moon Rising, Proud Mary, and Green River. They're all great dancing songs. Wow. So now we take a look at, they were at Woodstock 3 days. It was, again, 3 days of peace, love, and music. And to this very day, Mr. Cook said that, and I quote, "I'm still amazed at the number of people who didn't even know that we were one of the headliners at Woodstock 69.
I wondered too with Fogerty and the drummer that had gone into the reserves, and that situation was probably a year or two before Woodstock. Then all of a sudden you're at Woodstock. What a contrast between the two realities, eh?
Oh, absolutely, Dave. Like mega. But earlier you had reiterated to the band, their inspiration, you were right, came from Elvis Presley, the likes of Chuck Berry, Hank Williams, Little Richard, and of course the Motown sound. And they, in doing so, creating their own unique sound, became the standard bearers and foremost celebrants of homegrown American music during that time frame, and rightly so. So after Woodstock, CCR, they were busy honing in material for a 4th album called Willie and the Poor Boys. And this was their second top release, top LP. And one of those songs on that album, Dave, was Down on the Corner and Fortunate Son. Here again, released in November of 1969. And both those singles from that album climbed to the top of the charts. And here again, Down on the Corner went gold. Fortunate Son went gold. So,
can we spend a minute on Fortunate Son?
Yes,
I got a couple questions for you. That song, has been used. It's been used in a lot of movies, sort of the Vietnam era, and a lot of those veterans have talked about that song having an impact. As a kid, you're like 17, 18, growing up in Simcoe, and you hear that song, and knowing your family's background, what kind of an effect did it have on you? I'm just curious because I think it made a lot of people stop and think, did it not?
Yes, very true, Dave. During that time, of course, the Vietnam War, the lyrics, if you listen to the lyrics of that song, it really depicts that time frame on what was happening in the world. And it was a really down-to-earth lyrical masterpiece by John Fogerty. That says it all right there, Dave. It really does.
Did it speak the unspeakable for a social conscience of your generation?
Yeah, I think with the various rock groups, their lyrics were redefined and defined of what was happening in the world at that particular moment.
I mean, for you growing up in that era too, I mean, you and I have talked about this. There's so much great music, and there's so much music that had a meaning behind it too, right? There was a political statement or otherwise, and I appreciate that you were able to just look at when you were coming through that era, to look at that music and understand what was going on around you. It must have been quite the time for young men and women to sort out what they want their world to be in the next 20 years.
That's right, Dave. And too, it was good television during those years too. Not to say that TV today isn't, but there's one show that really was the focal point of music in the decade of the 60s. And in my mind, the Ed Sullivan Show.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
He had so many great acts on. That was the best 1 hour of TV programming ever.
For a kid like you.
It was unknown. And I remember watching this. Even to this day, I can see this crystal clear on the TV screen. Of course, back then, we didn't have color TVs. We had black and white. November 16th, 1969, Creedence Clearwater Revival performed on the Ed Sullivan Show for the first time. And the two songs they performed, the first song was Fortunate Son, and the second song was Down on the Corner.
Wow. And
that says it all right there.
You think about how many viewers he had.
Yes.
Like, that message was out there then, right? Like you said, everybody in both countries in North America were watching that show. So incredible.
Absolutely.
I didn't even know that. That's pretty. I'm going to have to see if there's any footage I can find on that one. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Now, CCR released another double-sided A hit, Traveling Band, and Who Will Stop the Rain. That was released in January of 1970. Now, the speedy Traveling Band, it was a strong Little Richard sound, and it was kind of bordering a little bit of copyright infringement there a bit, but all is well. Okay. And in April of 1970, CCR, they were set to begin their first European tour. And to support the upcoming live dates, John wrote Up Around the Bend, Run Through the Jungle. These are all good hits by CCR. And the band returned to Wally Heidra's San Francisco studio in June to record their album Cosmos Factory.
Yep.
And this album contained Traveling Band and Up Around the Bend in that album. So 2 more platinum hits from Cosmos Factory. How good is that?
And they did all this in that, 2.5 year span, 3 years?
Yeah.
Wow.
Their major thrust prime years were the year of 1969 and 1970.
That's crazy, eh? Like, how many they were just pushing out albums. Well, and I mean, it's what the industry required you to do at that time. But to be rating so proficiently, like, that's incredible what he was coming up with.
Yeah. And speaking of albums, the Pendulum album was released in December of 1970. It was another top seller. And one of the hits on that they did, a single hit, Have You Ever Seen the Rain?
Beautiful song.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. Now, as you know, through the years, and I don't care what band it is, you all have, in time, you have difficulties, tempers flare. It's just stating the case. It happens in the best bands in the world. It has right down through the history of music.
Yep.
And I'm sure, in all due respect to Mr. John Fogerty, he wasn't the easiest guy to get along with, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But anyway, despite that, CCR had a very successful run of hits, and their music has been enshrined in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And, that's, and that there signifies the value of the rock group, classic rock and rockabilly CCR.
When
you get your music in the Hall of Fame, you've made it. You've made it bigger than big.
Yeah. And Fogerty too, for all the stuff that band went through, the financial difficulties and, all the stuff that went on with the mismanagement and the band breaking up. And he's still I recently watched a video with him and Springsteen, and you can see how Springsteen still looked up to him. Those types of things are still, he sort of created that next wave too of artists that were sort of self-reflective, both politically and socially. So I think it's kind of it's interesting that he was able to do that still through, like you said, that 2-year window of all that music that band created too. And like you said, you're pushing out so many albums, you're on tour, there's going to be a bit of chaos, there's going to be a bit of trouble within the band. But still, what they gave us in that 2-year window is incredible. The music is just phenomenal. And like you said,
Dave,
starting in 1959, they sowed their oats, they put in their hours, they got good at what they were doing, which is incredible. And you were alluding to it earlier, and I wanted to ask you, when you're doing dances, like you said, CCR, that some of the more popular stuff comes out, but sort of what's the fringe song from CCR that you might get a lot of requests that you don't see coming? Is there one that's sort of like, you mentioned Susie Q? I mean, everybody loves Susie Q.
Yes.
And just, they're kind of, some are kind of danceable, aren't they? But not all.
No, this is true. And Susie Q is certainly up there. Bad Moon Rising, Proud Mary, Green River, just to mention a few. There is another song I get a few requests for, but to me, it's not danceable. Like, it's a good song. It's a good listening song. Who Will Stop the Rain? But it's not. It's not a dancing song. It's a good listening song. And that
you can't dance.
A lot of the DJs have to separate out before they do a particular theme dance or whatever. What are good dance songs that are automatics, fill the dance floor, versus a good listening song?
Yeah.
That is very, very
crucial. Yeah, you can have a lot of good listening songs. Nobody's on the floor. It doesn't look like they're.
Yeah. Play a good listening song. You're going to clear the dancing floor automatic right away.
And let's take a quick second here. Give me a quick update. What's going on? Are you back out? Or can people start booking you again? I mean, is it look like the doors are
for sure,
open?
Dave. We're back in the business again, as they say. We're gradually getting back into it. There are still restrictions with COVID out there, but I think we need to move forward with vigilance.
Yeah.
And I think things are going to open up quite nicely in the DJ world this year. I don't think it's going to be a tsunami of weddings, but it'll be a steady flow of wedding bookings. And the reason why I say that, there's still going to be a certain percentage of people that will be cautious.
Yeah, for sure.
And but hey,
it's respectful.
But we are ready to go. I've had right now, Dave, just to update you, I have 6 weddings booked for this year already. These will be there's one July the 2nd I have in Tilsonburg, and I've got 2 in August and I've got 3 booked for October.
Classy FM back on the road.
We're moving like Jagger again.
Yeah. What's the one? This is just, if you had your choice, and I know that you always, with your weddings, all the brides and the grooms make all the choices for their music, but if you had your choice, first gig back, what song would you play? It's been 2 years, 2.5 years. What song would you play, Randy? Put you on the spot.
I'd go back. It's a song that came out in the 70s. It's a good one. Kool and the Gang and Celebration.
Oh, there it is.
Just like that. Yep. Oh, yeah. Must. Right off the bat. Zippo.
Look at that. Randy's going to get him out on the floor dancing. You know what? That's good choice. Didn't see that one coming, but that's the choice to make for sure. Well, that's cool. I'm happy. I'm happy that you're able to get back and enjoy what you're doing and stop babysitting me. Let's keep our show going, folks. Don't worry. But the man's got to get out in front of the audience. That's for sure.
Sounds good, Dave. Sounds very good. So, just kind of updating.
Yeah.
So the band, they split on October 16th, 1972. And John Fogerty, he still continued on a solo career in 1973 with the Blue Ridge Rangers. And the Blue Ridge Rangers was actually John Fogerty. He is a one-man band.
Oh, wow.
Of course, he could play so many different instruments. So he was, he worked with that. And his next major hit was in 1975. It was Center Field.
Yeah. And it's 75? Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it had a lot of the CCR sound in it.
It does, yeah.
And it was really interesting. In February of 1987, at the Palomino Club, that's North Hollywood in Los Angeles, Fogerty, he broke his self-imposed ban on performing CCR hits. Oh. When the band broke up, he wouldn't solo play any of their hits. But hey, what the heck? Bob Dylan, George Harrison, they joined him on stage, and they finally, and you really got to thank Bob Dylan and George Harrison, because these two phenomenal artists, they convinced John Fogerty to do Proud Mary that evening.
Perfect.
And to me, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Proud Mary is definitely the signature song of Creedence Clearwater Revival. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree. I think you could go, you definitely could say that's their signature. That's their song. That's it. I mean, there's so many, but that for sure stands out.
Mm-hmm. And sad news, in September of 1990, John's older brother, Tom, had passed away. It was through complications of back surgery. And at Tom's death, John delivered the eulogy, of course. He said at Tom's funeral, and I quote, "We wanted to grow up and be musicians. I guess we achieved half of that, becoming rock and roll stars, but we didn't necessarily grow up."
Wow.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Powerful.
Yeah.
Wow. So what happened after that, Fantasy Records, they started releasing CCR's greatest hits in different packages. Mm-hmm. For example, Creedence Gold in 1973. There was more Creedence Gold in 1975. And you can go right on down the list of songs. For example, I'll just kind of give you a review here of some of the songs that were highlighted during their peak years. Okay, in 1968, and these are all, Dave, these are all platinum sellers.
Okay.
Susie Q, I Put a Spell on You.
Ooh.
In 1969, Proud Mary, Born on the Bayou, Bad Moon Rising, Lodi, Green River, Commotion, Down on the Corner, Fortunate Son. 1970, It Came Out of the Sky, Cotton Fields, Traveling Band, Who'll Stop the Rain, Run Through the Jungle, Up Around the Bend, Looking Out My Back Door, and Long as I Can See the Light. 1971, Have You Ever Seen the Rain? Sweet Hitchhiker, Hey Tonight. These are some of the B-side hits.
Yeah.
1972, Someday Never Comes. And 1973, it was a compilation of hits, one that Marvin Gaye did, and one also that the Beatles did. It was a compilation of I Heard It Through the Grapevine and Good Golly, Miss Molly.
Wow.
Interesting.
Yes.
CCR.
Yeah. Quite the band. Quite the band.
They certainly were. Their legacy, Dave, well, Rolling Stone magazine had them ranked at 82 in the top 100 bands of all time.
Kind of low, don't you think?
Yeah, I disagree with that. I think they should be in the top 10.
Yeah,
Wouldn't you agree, Dave?
Top 15, top 20. I agree. I think so. When you start looking at the history of rock and roll all the way through, yeah, they're going to be there. That's low to me. I mean, maybe I need to look at that whole list and see, but yeah, personally, I would have put them a lot higher for sure, like you.
Yeah. And in 2003, Rolling Stone 500 Greatest Albums of All Time. They included Green River, their album Green River, at number 95. I think that they should be in the top 40.
Yeah, easily. I agree.
Here again, we have different, Rolling Stone magazine. The fact that they're in there, that's the Rolling Stone magazine is a Bible of musical artists, their history, their biographies, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
So we have quite an interesting legacy of CCR. Once again, from 1959 all the way up to October 16th of 1972. CCR.
And what we talked about,
what a group.
Yeah, that social impact they had as well during the Vietnam War. They were quite the band. I think, like you said, they were more important than we probably realized in society in that era. And still today, their music's still relevant. Like you said, it still stands up to the test of time. So I think that's important as well for a great rock and roll band. And Fogerty's still out doing stuff. You can still find clips of him and I think his kids or his grandkids or something playing on YouTube. So it's you can still find his music around if you're looking. That's for sure. And he's always seems to be up to something. So good kudos, good for him. Good on him.
Yeah, right on, Dave. Yeah, good to see John still at it, and he's a workhorse. He'll be at it for quite a long time yet. So
cool.
But, that's a nice recapitulation on the legacy of Creedence Clearwater